the one thing that I wanted to make sure after the announcement, we've made it a practice to get around the state. And I always say I want to stay in perpetual motion, and that's all in an attempt to stay accessible to people and to be transparent about what we've just announced or are thinking about doing, and to be informed on what's happening on the ground. So when we talk about, hey, I was here 4 years ago, well, a lot's happened in 4 years, or a year ago, or sometimes a month ago. You know, I was just before here in Shelbyville, and we were talking about the last time I was in Shelbyville, we were talking about Greenleaf Foods and, you know, all that's occurred from that announcement to they were back, we hosted them during the Indianapolis 500, and then to today. You know, lots happened. You don't get the updates in the same detail if you're just texting or emailing or, you know, even on the phone than you do in person.
People.
That's right.
Yeah. So what are some of the highlights over the past 4 years that you're proud of, or that you think that, you know, still need to be worked on in this next term if you were to win the election?
Well, I'm proud of our team. You know, we've got about 28,000 state employees, and our cabinet and agency heads have, I think, worked together more so than I've ever seen. Their chemistry is unique in the sense that the synergy that they tap into every day. We just had an announcement today where the Department of Health and FSSA just did a joint announcement,
Okay.
symbolic of the way that our cabinet operates, so that, you know, the Commissioner of NDOT and the Secretary of Commerce are constantly working together, kind of hand in glove, as is the Commissioner of Health and FSSA. That is something I'm very proud of, because it is kind of breaking down silos, and we're operating in a real joint manner, very efficient. I'm proud of our policies and the programs that are taking root, the new ones especially. We're just doing more of what's working, and I hope a whole lot less of what's not. And so by putting people first into the 3 areas that I really focus in on every day, and it gets wider. I mean, the viewpoint gets much wider, but, you know, I focus on putting people first in terms of skilling our workforce up, making sure the programs are there, whether it's folks in pre-K or K through 12 or post-secondary, or reskilling or re-engaging or recruiting people. These programs are in place now that are working to skill people up to fill all those 100,000 plus jobs that are available in high wage, high demand sectors. So the proof is in the pudding, and we're seeing more people go to work in jobs that they're passionate about, even if they're coming from, as an example, incarcerated status. So since I was sworn in, our recidivism rate's gone down about 4%. I attribute that to the programs that are skilling people up, not just offering folks hope after they complete their time inside, but actually kind of a seamless transition from the time they're in to the time that they're getting out to the time that they're out on their own 2 feet. And for some of these folks, it's their first chance, not second, in life.
So when you look at your goals in this re-election campaign and over the next 4 years, if you were to be governor again, what are some things that would benefit Johnson County residents and pocketbooks specifically?
Well, a whole lot more opportunity, and as Johnson County is growing, Franklin, where we sit right now, is growing, and managing that growth, improving, as you all have been focused on, really been kind of a leader in this effort for some years, quality of place, which spills over quickly into quality of life. That is a box that when we're out pitching the state of Indiana, we're obviously pitching our location being in the heart of the heartland, in the center of the country, advantageous when you're producing and distributing products. We're obviously pitching our economy very strong, obviously AAA credit rating, low cost of doing business, a place of certainty and predictability, continuity. Very high profile success rate if you move here and invest here to grow. We're pitching our workforce, making sure that there are talent pipelines that go right into the business from, Franklin College or Ivy Tech or Notre Dame, right into the business that's going to grow here in Johnson County. And then we're addressing, when we're trying to get people to move overseas or from another state, trying to attract talent here and grow our population, which we are an in-migration state. Oftentimes that comes down to kind of the X factor, and that is this a place where I want to live, work, and play and stay? And that's quality of life. And so the state of Indiana is continuing to step forward and make sure that we're connecting with communities, again, unlike we've ever done before. Meaning the amount of investment that we're making, that comes down to programs like community crossing programs or stellar communities or the Main Street program, or making sure that we're a state that's still 83+% farmer forest. How are we going to tap into all that potential, billions of dollars of potential to network people who are living in internet darkness right now, so that companies coming from Amsterdam or you name it in the world, want to come. And oftentimes that means convincing their employees in those home countries, whether it's Tokyo or Amsterdam, and their spouses to move here, to start up the business, and then to hire Hoosiers that will be moving into one county from another, or one state to our state. And so that will be a big, it's going to continue to be a big effort and a big push from the state, is to partner with, no matter how small, one-dot towns to big cities, urban, suburban, rural, how we connect with one another from a regional perspective. So when folks are looking at, again, starting a business or growing a business, they're looking at location, they're looking at economic certainty, and then they're looking at where we actually are going to live. And they're looking at regions, not just in the country, but regions of the state. And so that's why infrastructure, we're putting people first there too. That's why that internet is important. That's why our, former mayor of this town is running our Department of Transportation, as you know. And he doesn't, nor do I. The first time we sat down and had an interview, I said, let's talk about the definition of transportation, because it's not just roads and bridges. It is how we transport ourselves, our ideas, our products throughout the world. And so Commissioner McGinnis, he looks at, yes, a 20-year, $60+ billion transportation budget, paid for, by the way, not debt financed, all transparent, all put up on a website 5 years at a time, keeps current, so people sitting in Frankfurt, Germany, literally are right now looking at every single county, every project, start time, stop time, cost, and they know that in addition to the state investment, that local communities in 2017, we also stepped up their budgets about 40%. So they know that the state assets, roads and bridges in this case, can connect with local investment right to the factory floor or to the bay. And that's a very powerful and persuasive card to be able to play when you're competing against other states with less certainty. But also, Joe McGinnis, Commissioner McGinnis, has to factor in what those roads then connect to themselves. Do they connect to airports, regional airports? Do they connect to the Indianapolis airport that was just ranked, #1 in North America for 7 straight years? I call that a streak. To Europe, first ever transatlantic nonstop direct flight to Europe. And now we're getting attention from other countries as well that say we want to connect. with the state of Indiana,
And-
domestic flights and international flights.
And speaking of roads and NDOT, I-69, talk about the progress that's been made since you have become governor, 3 years ago with that project, because that's going to have a huge impact on Johnson County as it gets a little bit closer.
Yeah. Well, I-69 has been talked about as long as before I was born, and the need to finish that missing link here in the state of Indiana. So folks from Indianapolis to Fort Wayne, I-69 means something totally different to folks from Indianapolis to Evansville.
Right.
And by the way, it means something totally different to someone in Texas, all the way up through Michigan, all the way from Mexico to Canada. This is not about two cities connecting each other with one another in Indiana. It's not about connecting three states with each other. It's about connecting three countries who happen to be our two biggest trading partners in the world. And so to have that corridor completed in our state is critically important. When I was sworn in, we had to make a decision whether or not to take over Section 5. And then we were going to have to make the decision on where to find money for Section 6. And fortunately, and I give credit where credit's due, and that's to state employees at NDOT and Commissioner Joe McGinnis. I know I'm maybe preaching to the choir to some of your readers, because I heard from some who were sad to see him take on this assignment.
Right.
But I always say Franklin's loss was Indiana's gain. But I give a lot of credit to Commissioner McGinnis because he was able to ease any apprehension and or anxiety about the state taking over a project already in the works. And we made up time because of our state employees and his oversight. Then we were able to, our administration, so we got that Section 5 done. And then we were able to say, okay, now that we're already through Section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Section 6, very costly price tag. So I'm glad we started in the south and moved our way up, because if you would have started up with $1 billion, portion of it, maybe a different outcome. But we got up to Section 6, and we were able to renegotiate that Northern Indiana toll road lease, throw off $1 billion, which we were able to put toward direct flights, and we were able to put toward internet connections and a trail system, back to the quality of life discussion that we were having for local communities to apply for grants to connect with each other. But we were also able to move $600 million cash into I-69 Section 6, which essentially helped make up that difference with the additional revenue coming from the 2017 infrastructure program, that 20-year, $60 billion program. So we're in a record year right now in that 20-year program, but we'll continue to be in a record year through 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24. And so for the foreseeable future, we'll be doing more, including finishing I-69, which moved that from 2027 completion to 2024, which is significant in that, it's going to cost less paying for it now with cash, finishing it early, and for site selectors who are looking at just such an attractive place for investment like Johnson County, being so close to the airport and to major interstate access, and then having such a high quality of life, being already such a high quality of place with great schools. Again, pre-K through 12 plus post-secondary higher ed access. This is an ideal location to grow as a person, as a community, and as a business. And that I-69 project is central to that growth.
And speaking of schools a little bit, changing topics, here in the last year, 3 local school districts have done public safety referendums. So what are you looking at? I know that in the legislature this year, more money for teachers, more money for DCS, more money for schools in general. What are you doing to make sure that all of the schools have equal safety, if that makes sense? Some of them are doing referendums, some of them are not. What are we doing to make sure that there's equal safety?
Right. That's the central, you're getting right at the discussion that is in part of a larger discussion. We do have, when we're rolling out the safety grant program right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we beefed up that program, and schools can apply for those grant dollars. In addition, we made it easier for schools to, on their own, as they have for the last century, local schools have local control of their, not just local bargaining agreements, but to how they want to differentiate themselves from other local
Mm-hmm.
schools. And so part of what the kind of long-term teacher compensation commission is getting at is it's taking the same approach. And by the way, there are 3 upcoming meetings in August this commission has. August 19th is in Indianapolis, August 24th is in Evansville, and August 27th is in Elkhart. And plus we have a website that folks can go to and make recommendations or suggestions, teacher compensation. So it's in.gov/gov teacher compensation.
Okay.
And there's been a couple hundred people who have already made recommendations about some of the disparity that you've talked about, in addition to teacher pay. But how do we as a state, because as you mentioned, we sent more money, a couple different buckets. We sent the teacher appreciation grant, which is about $37.5 million, not about exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved out of our surplus $150 million and paid down debt in local schools, essentially paying off a mortgage, saying that now that you don't have to pay that, I hope you pay teachers more.
Right.
That's my request. The good news is that superintendents in the rural, suburban, and urban associations all said, we hear you, this money needs to get to teachers. We'll see. Because that's short of the state demanding or doing the local bargaining,
Mm-hmm.
doing state bargaining. And so part of what this commission will get at is it will show ultimately, it's kind of like our 2017 infrastructure program or our Department of Child Services report that said, here are 18 things. We said, give us the good, the bad, the ugly. Here's the goal. How do we get there? How much does it cost? And then how do we pay for it? And there's lots of different options. And this, to me, in my mind, is the same way. We need to hear from superintendents. That's why we've got superintendents on that on the commission, or teachers, and or taxpayers, and or the business community. We all have an equal stake in a student's eventual and ultimate outcome post in secondary education or college or career. Mm-hmm. And so we've got everyone at the table, including the Indiana State Teachers Association. We're going through these very questions that you're asking. That will be prepared no later than, it's there to inform us going into the next budget session. Because in addition to that $763 million that we increased mm-hmm. to K through 12 in this last budget year, we know that in order to meet that goal of being, one of the top-ranked Midwestern states in terms of our teacher compensation, our teachers make, on average, in the state of Indiana, $50,600. But we know we got to get up to the 58,000 plus if we're going to get competitive with neighboring states. 58,000 north of. And we know already in the state of Indiana that our total revenue, 50% plus, just under 51%, goes to K through 12. And so when you take out the Department of Child Services and Medicaid, of that remaining half, mm-hmm. that's 2/3. So we are left with 1/3 for all other state business. When you take out K through 12, which is half, and then DCS and Medicaid, 2/3, we're left with 1/3. So what do we do to increase state support for teacher funding, which I'm convinced we can do? We have to grow the pie, obviously, or start talking about where to take away from the third that's left. And we have to talk about the relationship, just as you did at the very outset, the question, you're almost leading the witness, me. What is the shared responsibility, state and local, to solve this deficiency, or to make up the deficiency? Because again, we know what the goal is. Now, how do we get there and how do we pay for it? And that's in terms of school safety investments as well. Now, in the meantime, we've made it doable for schools who want to have a referendum just on school safety to do so, and some will. And we'll see where that goes, but we also know that we want to address both. We want to make sure our schools are safe, and that local schools have insisted on maintaining local control and decision making. So I'm not one of those folks who wants to take over local school bargaining, or essentially make every teacher a state employee. State employees make on average about $43,000, to put this all in perspective, and they're doing very important work as well. But that's why I'm equally confident about not just the commission makeup and their different areas of expertise, but I'm also confident that with citizen input, it will yield a blueprint, just as the DCS report did, just as our infrastructure program did. And that's kind of as I always say, that's kind of the Hoosier way. We're going to let the data drive our decisions, and that Hoosier way turns out is the right way to do things, responsibly, per the taxpayer.
How did you make the decision on what to spend that extra money on? I know a lot of it was focused in northern Indiana with US 31 between Indy and South Bend, and some of it went to the schools up there. How did you come to those
A portion
decisions?
of it was, not a lot in terms of relatively speaking. It was 4 different capital projects that were just approved in the General Assembly, plus facilities, buildings like
Okay.
Ivy Tech in Columbus, or a STEM facility in Muncie and Ball State. So 4 projects, the swine barn at the State Fairgrounds. 4 projects like that that were just approved in the General Assembly to finance. Mm-hmm. And they were debt financed, obviously bonded, so we were borrowing money, paying interest, and going to pay interest. And then there was, as you mentioned, the final 2 intersections and a railroad crossing on 31 between Indianapolis and South Bend, which have been always included in our long-term infrastructure program priorities. So we're making progress on that, just like I-69. We're making progress on 31, and we're making progress on I-69, but how do you finish it? We, to be completely transparent with you, we looked at a lot of different options outside of these 4 capital projects and the road completion. But where we ultimately made the decision was we didn't want to spend those reserves on one-time investments that would be gone the next year, and then we would be committed to finding that amount on an annual or semi-annual basis going forward forever. And so what we did, so if you built a statue, or say you built a state archives building, there's a lot of interest in building a state archives building. We didn't have that budgeted. Could we have paid for it out of that? Yes. But that would have been required some ongoing expenses in addition to what was already approved in the last budget session to bond, to build. And so what we did is we said, okay, if we were able to pay off those projects, because when we did the budget, we didn't know it would be this rosy at the close of the books. And so we said, well, we'll still be able to maintain our AAA credit rating, important for not just the state, but important for local communities when they're borrowing. They get to partner with that credit rating, much different than Illinois going to their state, junk bond status, Indiana, local communities, AAA status, like double-digit difference in borrowing. So we were able to protect that, and we were able to say, all right, we'll just pay cash for these 4 projects, and then we won't have to pay the interest going on 20 to 25 years. And we'll save $100 million in interest payments. Or when I say we will, it's taxpayers that are saving that money. Because all of a sudden that, on an annual basis, frees up that money year after year after year after year for the next 25 years that we can then devote to, that can be part of the conversation for teacher pay increases. And that's been my preference. Now that won't get us all the way there, obviously. But it does get you moving in that direction. It does find new money on an annual basis rather than spending it in one area and then saying, now what? Because that's what we've been doing, for 202 years, you might say. Kind of going from 2 years to 2 years to 2 years to 2 years. And yes, we've been increasing education funding even during some very lean, tough years. And again, this past year, we increased it $763 million. And we're hoping that gets to the teachers, into the, not just classroom, but into their paychecks. But that was the decision making, was how do we make investments that will yield long-term, ongoing results? And had we known that it was going to be that rosy, maybe we wouldn't have bonded those projects. Maybe we just would have paid for them. You know what I mean? Allocated the dollars for them. We didn't know that. And the last 60 to 75 days, the way our economy continues to grow, that's a good thing. We're able to do more.
We've got time for one more.
It's a pleasant place to be. But it doesn't make the decisions any more easier, but we had to make the most responsible long-term decision we could.
So going into this next re-election campaign, this next term, what are some of the big things that you're going to do differently than you did the first time around? What are some big goals going forward?
Well, I'm not going to, take my eye off the ball, and I'm going to remain pretty focused. Like I said, we have 5 pillars that all rest on civility. That's got this state moving in the right direction, and we're starting to leave people in our dust. What we can't do is take our foot off the pedal, and the pedal to the metal. We need to be doubling down. We need to be taking advantage of this time of growth. We need to be taking advantage of these opportunities before us. So we'll continue actually to be moving in this very same direction, focused on strengthening people, focused on strengthening our infrastructure, how we connect with the world, focused on strengthening and modernizing our economy. We just came out of a legislative session where we modernized our economic toolbox, so to speak, so that we're much more competitive to attract the businesses of the future, attract more technology advancement, attract more businesses that are in the research and development space and in the innovative spaces and invention spaces. That's those high wage, high demand jobs that, with all the advancements that have been made and competing against the rest of the world, a state like Indiana, who has a rich heritage of making and growing and shipping things, we have to be synonymous with inventing and innovating our way into the future. I really liked a recent magazine article that said the road to Mars runs through Indiana, and that we are they called it the crossroads of the cosmos. So we've been known as the crossroads of America, but when you think about our evolution as a state with our deep ag roots and forging our way out of the forest and the limestone industry and the natural resources that we were able to really kind of build our whole state and people on, now we've, you know, we've kind of gone into the manufacturing space and excelled. We're the #1 manufacturing state per capita in the country. But where will we be 10 years from now in terms of advanced manufacturing? I want to still be #1. And when you think about the crossroads of the cosmos, when you think about our, you know, Allison, who was a co-founder of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, who was working on a test track and building auto engines, who then said, you know, we could build bigger engines and we could be supplying the aviation industry, and then we got into aviation, then we got into aerospace, and then we got into space. And it's not just our astronauts that are going on to Purdue onto space. It's all the companies that every time we send a shipment up into outer space, it's got Hoosier fingerprints on it. That's what we want to attract a lot more of in the life sciences, biosciences, aviation and aerospace, defense industries. We're, you know, right down the road, right up the road from a major military installation that's critically important to our national security. We want to do more of those type of partnerships and attract more of those investments here to the state of Indiana. And to do so, we got to stay on the road that we're on and continue to accelerate.